Friends, at this time we are going to begin services. If anyone has a cell phone or any other noise-making device, if you could take a moment now to please turn it off or place it in the silent mode. Officiating our services today is Rabbi Jeffrey Weil and Cantor Daniel Gale.
We'll begin with the act of kriya. Kriya means tearing. And in the Bible, when something calamitous, sad, shocking would happen to any of our biblical forebears, they would really do two things. They would tear their garments, in essence really exposing their wounded, vulnerable hearts. And they would also, in the biblical idiom, raise their kolot, their voices, in other words, cry. So this is a time for tearing and for weeping. So the four of you who are wearing the ribbons will rise in a moment to repeat after me, saying the blessing. I'll come to you, and we'll do that. The blessing acknowledges God as the Dayan HaEmet, the judge of truth. So Larry, Marla, Brenda, and Michael, you're wearing the ribbons, so please rise now. And just the mourners with the ribbons, and we'll say that blessing together. Adonai, ma adam v'teda ehu, ben enosh v'techashvehu. Adam the heveldama, yamav ketzel over, baboki yatzitz v'chalaf, la'erev yimalel v'yavesh. These are the words of the psalmist saying, Adonai, eternal God, what are we that you have regard for us, and what are we that you would even be mindful of us? We are mere mortals. We are like a breath, our days a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning it shoots up and is renewed, and in the evening of all of our lives that grass fades and withers. But God, you cause all of us to return unto dust, saying, Shuvu b'nei Adam, return, O mortal ones. Would that we were wise, would that we understood whither we go from here, for when we die we carry nothing with us, not our glory, not our riches. But God, you say, Shmor tam u'r'eh yashar. Mark thee wholehearted. Behold thee upright. For those are the ones who shall find shalom, who shall find peace in the end. Friends, we gather today to pay tribute to one, remember one who was Tam B'Yashar. He was a wholehearted person. He was upright. He lived with integrity. He was a good person, sharp, bright person, loving and very committed to family. Those he loved. Bob Fine, his memory for blessing. Adonai, mi yagor b'ohalecha, mi ishkon b'har kodshecha, holech tamim, u'po'el tzedek, v'dover emet bilvavo. Another psalm, this is from Psalm 15, saying, Adonai, eternal God, who shall dwell in your sanctuary? Who is it that may abide upon your holy mountain? It is one who lives with integrity, one who does what is right, one who speaks the truth in his heart, one who does not slander others, one who does no evil to his fellow human being, who would not reproach his neighbor, one who stays far from bad influences, bad neighbors, One who acts in such a way shall stand firm le'olam, forever. We have in our handouts the 23rd Psalm. Our sacred scriptures have something for us for every moment of our lives, the happy times and the sad times as well. So the 23rd Psalm is something we, of course, read at this time, at times like this. And I invite my colleague, Cantor Daniel Gale, to come forward to chant the 23rd Psalm in Hebrew, and then we will read it together in English.
מזמור דוד, אדוני רואי, לא אחסר. בינות דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפשי שובב, ינחני במגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צלמוות לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני את שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
We read together 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We are in an interesting, if a little bit of an obscure period in the Jewish calendar right now, the period between Passover, which we just celebrated, and Shavuot, which happened 7 weeks after Passover, is called Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. And we literally count every single evening at services, we count the days as they pass. And tradition bids us to use this period of time, these 7 weeks, these 49 days, to focus on our characters, actually. Our Jewish tradition is always trying to strengthen us and edify us and make us more moral and whole and decent human beings. Bob Fine, during his years, nearly a century of years, possessed the kind of attributes that our tradition wants us to work at, and perfect during this particular time. The traits that make for a full and a strong individual. He was, for instance, dedicated to his work, very hardworking. He was a giving person, as I'll explain later. He developed his intellect. He was sharp. He developed his body as well. He exercised, and our bodies and our health they are gifts from God. He loved both high culture, and he loved the Bears and the Cubs and so forth as well. He was devoted to his family, to his people, to his country. He was a particularly devoted relative, family member to so many, and particularly a loving father and, of course, husband as well. That's who he was. So this period of time, he would have mastered this period of time, the Sfirat HaOmer. Bob was the child of loving and nurturing parents, Max and Jeanette, brother to Florence and Philip. He grew up at 5001 Monticello, down the block from where the family has made its home for many decades now. When he was just a boy, 5 years old, the family took, very interestingly, a several months-long trip to Vishtinets, Lithuania, which is nestled very close to the Polish border. To keep Bob and Florence occupied, they were kids, their parents, really their father, bought them a horse. He told me this once. He said that he loved the horse, his sister not so much. One time on a visit to Poland, Bob heard Hitler speaking. It was through a public address, some sort of public address system. He told me that the voice that he heard as a little boy sounded like yelling, and that voice remained in his head throughout his life. They were away from the United States for long enough that young Bob forgot how to speak English. A few years later, by the way, a few years after the family was there, locals murdered every single Jew in that town, in Vishtinets. The Fine family was in the kosher butcher business. And they were very successful. They had several places, several locations. Max, Bob's father, again, was a supporter of the Irgun, which was led by Menachem Begin. And Bob always had memories of Irgun members coming to their home in the 40s. And I wonder if he was perhaps influenced by this aspect of his childhood and his father's interest, that Bob joined the ROTC at von Steuben High School. He became an expert marksman and won a scholarship, he told me, to West Point. His aim was true. His aim was true in various ways. His aim was true in love as well. For there was a girl at von Steuben who frankly had little interest in this skinny little kid, Bob Fine. But then one summer came, and the sunshine and exercise did something to the boy, and he became like a strapping young man. And he came back to school, and that was as like a new man. And that was the start of a long, long romance of Bob and Burl. Bob, after high school, he had been accepted to West Point. As I said, it was a scholarship. And this was really no insignificant accomplishment, for there were quotas. That academy had a strict quota on Jewish students. So for Bob Fine to be accepted there was really an achievement. I'd say it also demonstrates a certain boldness. Usually human beings like to be with places where they're well accepted and among people who are similar to them, at least a certain amount of people who are similar to them. But young Bob Fine is a young man who's willing to do something very different, to go to West Point as one of just a few Jewish students. But it was not to be. There was circumstances in the family, and Bob had to answer really another call to duty, and that was to work at the fine meat markets, which he did for a while. This postponed, to some degree, his college learning, his college education, but he was educated in other ways too. He always remembered what he had learned as a butcher, and to the workers at Jewel, even unto today, they remember him in the deli department, in the butcher area, and he was like a rock star, as I think Marla told me. Bob did enroll at Northwestern. He graduated in 1953, I believe the same year that they married. 1953, he and Burl married. They first lived on Mozart, and then in 1956, they settled at 5041 North Monticello, Bob, Burl, Larry, and Marla. And the cats. They spent a lot of time at this time with family, with Florence and with David, Philip, and Myrna, and of course lots of cousins, nieces, and nephews who loved their Uncle Bob. On summer weekends, they'd sometimes drive to Michigan shores. Max and Jeanette were among the early families, Jewish families, among the first that launched that community. Bob loved the family, did not love the beach. He could have done without the sand and the lack of air conditioning and so forth. He was comfortable back here in Chicago. And this is where he could do his work, and he was very, very committed to work. He first worked in sales for a company that made, among other items, those plastic flamingos for your lawn. And lots of those flamingos landed in the fine backyard. Bob also began playing tennis quite early, in the 60s, several years before it became as popular as it would become here in the States. And Larry and Marla would love to go to Mather Park to watch their dad play. He was a great tennis player. Besides his on-court success, he certainly found work success as well. He was driven. He eventually became general sales manager and vice president at Hamilton. Successful, but could be stressful as well. And after some difficult incidents, including a dangerous flight, airplane situation, Bob Fine became overwhelmed. The stress was overwhelming, and he ended up hospitalized. With time and with effort, he learned to navigate and manage his nervous condition. Aiding him with this was Recovery, Inc., which supports those who struggle with nervous symptoms. Bob was helped by it and helped through it as well. He helped others through it. He paid it forward, as they say, by leading meetings for Recovery, Inc., and even taking calls at home from others who were at that moment in the grip of anxiety. He would talk them through it. That's really a great mitzvah. It really is. You're giving of your soul and drawing from your experience and, of course, your time to help others. Bob continued to work at Hamilton, and for a decade, even Marla worked with him in the office, and they often traveled to trade shows as well. Bob was very comfortable in his familiar environments. Despite the traveling, he was most comfortable, it seems, and satisfied at home. He and his Burl rarely, if ever, argued. Their love was, as nephew Michael said, a love story of the ages. They both enjoyed working in the garden. Bob focused on roses, and perhaps some of you received photographs. He would take pictures of his roses and send to people. He was also, as a lifelong North Sider, Bob loved watching the Cubs on TV, and the Bears and the Bulls, particularly during the Jordan era, and of course tennis too. He loved his teams, and he loved fine dining, and he loved classical music. As a boy, Max would take Bob to hear the great Richard Tucker sing, and opera became a lifelong passion for Bob. He and Burl would go to the Lyric. He'd listen to opera and more at home as well. Burl would listen to other kinds of music. She was open to like the Beatles, which is not for Bob. In later years, I assume it was later years, Bob would really crank up the music, the opera, whatever, and when he dozed off, Marla would come and turn it off or turn it down or something. Bob retired from Hamilton at 67 years old, mandatory retirement, but he remained busy. He launched from home Fine Marketing Group. A little while later, after 53 years of marriage, his beloved Burl passed away. Bob never dated after that. He would forever be Burl's husband, and he would always refer to her misty-eyed as my wife. And I saw on the application that he filled out for membership at our congregation, Ezra HaBanim, the Niles Township Jewish congregation, he wrote, next to his name, he wrote, widow. Burl was really forever with him. Bob, even after he closed his business, remained dynamic. He had so many interests. He was, again, as Michael said, he's like a Renaissance man. Really, there was so much to him. He focused on his investments, and he was the rare person who actually read prospectuses and shareholder reports, and he kept them. And there's still a stack of them in the home, a monument to his sharp mind and to his keen business insight. He kept himself very well informed on politics as well. And as I mentioned, he remained physically active. Marla played tennis with her dad. Fun, yes, a nice bonding experience, but maybe not so much fun to lose to one's 80-something-year-old father in tennis. But still, it shows he played into his 80s, and I think only finished playing, retired from tennis in his mid-80s. But family was paramount. It was always paramount. And Bob was a leader and organizer of family events. His concern for the family was very, very deep. He and I spoke just last year, less than a year ago. He was very eager to make sure that his brother Philip would have a suitable place to live. A few years before that, for his 90th birthday, he took the family out to Jameson's. It was even without his beloved wife there at this point, it was a special moment for this proud patriarch to be surrounded by loved ones. He told me the story that when Bob was a toddler, the family dog, Captain, protected him. Seems to have saved his life, the little child's life, Captain did. And Bob always remained a lover of pets, and the cats attest to that fact. And over the last few days since he died, the cats at home have been confused, seeking him, and cuddling, snuggling as they never have really. Moreover, Marla found that one of Bob's rose bushes just withered and died, as if it died with him. All of it at 5041 North Monticello, the home that Bob Fine inhabited with his beloved family for so many years. He had a lot to say, including leading seders, and he was a good conversationalist. And that voice is silenced. That voice will no longer be heard. But the memory remains, the memory of the man, his very diverse interests and his achievements, his accomplishments, his sharp mind, his truly noble example, that all remains. Zichrono livracha, may Bob Fine's memory always be for blessing. Amen. Leida hi reshit uftira tachlit. Birth is a beginning, death is a destination. Life is a growing from stage to stage until it reaches its final destination. The journey of Bob Fine's long life and good life has now reached its conclusion. We please rise now for the memorial prayer. It's the El Malei Rachamim. It means God full of compassion. After this, the service here at the chapel will be concluded. We will recite Mourner's Kaddish at the cemetery. Cantor Gale.
Hail, Malei Rachamim, Shachein Bameromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanefei השכינה במעלות קדושים, קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע, מזהירים את נשמת ברוך בן מרדכי שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתו. אנה בעל הרחמים, הסתירהו בסר כנפיך לעולמים. התצרור בצור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו. ונאמר אמן.
O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure who shine brightly like the light of the heavens, to the soul of Bob Fine, who has gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is his portion. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. You may be seated.
Friends, this concludes this portion of the service. The interment will continue at Westlawn Cemetery in Norwich. Later today, the family will be together at the Fine Residence, which is 5041 North Monticello Avenue in Chicago, and that's today from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. All are welcome. That information is available in the folders that you received as you arrived today, and if you did not receive one, they will be made available as you depart. And for those of you joining us online, that information is also available on our website. For those of you who will be joining us in procession to the cemetery, we ask that you please keep a few safety measures in mind. Please make sure that you have your bright headlights and your hazard lights on at all times. Make sure that you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker to place on the passenger side of your front windshield, and follow the vehicles in front of you as closely as safety permits, especially as we make our way through the intersections. At this time, we'll ask everyone to please rise, And if anyone would like to act as a pallbearer today, you're welcome to step forward at this time as we escort the family, the casket, and the clergy from the chapel.